Why did you hate me so much? You really want to know? Yes. You think Peter was the reason I betrayed you? Do you remember the scholarship you almost got before leaving the village? Yes. I made sure you didn't get it.
When Glory caught her husband in bed with her best friend, her world collapsed in seconds. But what she didn't know was this: the betrayal was only the beginning, because the woman she once called sister was not finished destroying her life. Grace had lost everything: her reputation, her friendship, her dignity, and now she wanted revenge. The night Glory discovered the truth became the most humiliating moment of Grace's life. The image of Glory standing in the doorway, her eyes filled with disbelief, her voice shaking as she whispered, "Grace, why?" That memory haunted Grace for days. She left the house in silence that night. No shouting, no excuses, no explanations, just silence. But silence can be more painful than anger. For the first time in years, Grace returned to her small apartment alone. The room suddenly felt smaller, lonelier. The once cheerful place she shared with Glory now felt like a prison of memories. Grace sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. Her phone buzzed. It was Peter. She hesitated before answering. "Grace," Peter said nervously, "Glory has thrown me out of the house." Grace expected sympathy in his voice, but what she heard instead was regret. "I made a terrible mistake." Grace's heart tightened. "What are you saying?" she asked slowly. Peter sighed deeply. "I was weak. What happened between us? It should never have happened." Grace felt anger rising in her chest. "You were not complaining before," she said coldly. Peter remained silent. Then he said something that shattered her completely. "I want to fix my marriage." Grace's fingers trembled around the phone. "You want to go back to Glory?" "Yes." In that moment, Grace realized something painful. Peter never loved her. She had only been a distraction, a moment of weakness, nothing more. And suddenly, the humiliation burned deeper than the betrayal itself. Grace whispered one sentence before hanging up: "You will regret this." The next morning, Grace did something bold. She went to Peter's office. The building was tall and elegant, located in Victoria Island, the kind of place Grace had always dreamed of belonging. She walked confidently past the reception desk, but when Peter saw her, his face changed immediately. "Grace, what are you doing here?" Grace crossed her arms. "I came to see you." Peter looked uncomfortable. "You shouldn't be here." Grace laughed softly. "You didn't say that when you were calling me every night." Peter closed his office door quickly. "Listen carefully," he said quietly. "What happened between us is over." Grace stared at him in disbelief. "You used me." "No," Peter replied. "I was weak." Grace stepped closer. "You promised me things." Peter shook his head. "I never promised you anything." That sentence felt like a slap. Grace's pride cracked. For years, she believed she deserved a better life. Now, the very man she risked everything for was pushing her away like she meant nothing. Peter opened the door. "You should leave." Grace walked out slowly, but inside her mind, something dangerous had awakened. If she could not have happiness, then no one would. Days turned into weeks. Grace stopped smiling, stopped laughing, stopped caring. At the boutique, customers noticed the change. Madame Bose even warned her, "Grace, whatever problem you have, leave it at home. Business first." Grace nodded, but her mind was far away. She was thinking about Glory, about Peter, about the life that should have been hers. And then, one evening, she remembered something important, a secret one Glory once told her. During their years of friendship, Glory had shared everything, even things about Peter's businesses, things that could destroy him. Grace smiled slowly. For the first time in weeks, maybe she didn't need Peter's love. Maybe she could destroy his success instead. Peter's wealth didn't come from one business. He owned several companies, importing goods, real estate, investments. But Grace remembered something Glory once mentioned casually. One of Peter's businesses was operating in a legal gray area. It wasn't exactly illegal, but if the authorities looked closely, it could cause serious problems. Grace had ignored the information before, but now it became a weapon. One rainy evening, Grace sat in a small cafe with a man named Tunde. Tunde worked as a journalist, and journalists loved one thing more than anything else: a scandal. Grace slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, photos, business details. Tunde looked confused. "What is this?" Grace smiled coldly. "The story that will make your career." 2 weeks later, the headlines exploded across Lagos. Business tycoon under investigation. Peter Adewale accused of fraud. News channels repeated the story all day. Authorities began asking questions. Investors panicked. Peter's companies started losing money rapidly. Inside his office, chaos erupted. Phones ringing non-stop. Employees whispering. Lawyers rushing in and out. Peter stood in the middle of it all, stunned. How did this happen? But somewhere across the city, Grace watched the news from her small apartment. A slow smile spread across her face. "Now you know how it feels," she whispered. But revenge has a way of creating unexpected consequences. When the scandal broke, Glory returned to Lagos immediately. Despite everything Peter had done, she still cared about him. When she saw the news reports, she knew something was wrong. Peter was many things, but he was not a criminal. And then suddenly, she remembered something chilling. The only person who knew those secrets was Grace. Glory arrived at Grace's apartment late one evening. Grace opened the door and froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was thick. Finally, Glory asked quietly, "Did you do this?" Grace leaned against the doorframe casually. "Do what?" "Destroy Peter." Grace laughed softly. "You think I have that kind of power?" Glory's eyes filled with disappointment. "You were my sister." Grace's smile disappeared. "And you stole my life." Glory shook her head. "No, Grace. I loved you. I trusted you." Grace's voice rose with anger. "You had everything." "Not everything," Glory whispered. "I lost my best friend." For the first time, Grace hesitated. But pride is a powerful thing. She simply closed the door. The investigation continued for months. Peter eventually proved he was innocent, but the damage was already done. His reputation suffered. Several business partners withdrew. Millions were lost. But Grace's victory did not bring her happiness. Instead, her life grew darker. She lost her job at the boutique after Madame Bose discovered her connection to the scandal. People began avoiding her. Whispers followed her everywhere. Grace finally understood something painful. Revenge destroys the person seeking it just as much as the target. Jealousy is like holding fire in your hand while waiting to throw it at someone else. Grace tried to destroy Glory's happiness, but in the end, she burned herself instead. And the friendship that once felt like sisterhood was gone forever. Grace thought she had already lost everything: her best friend, her reputation, her job, her future. But there was one secret she had hidden for years, a secret that could destroy Glory's life forever. And when the truth finally came out, everyone realized something terrifying. The betrayal between these two women had started long before Peter ever walked into that clothing store. Months passed after the scandal that nearly destroyed Peter's business. Although he eventually cleared his name, things were never the same again. Many investors left. Several of his companies struggled. The once confident businessmen now lived with constant pressure. But something else had changed. Peter and Glory were no longer together. Even though he begged for forgiveness, Glory could not forget what she had seen that night. The image of her husband and her best friend together haunted her mind. So she left. She moved into a quiet apartment far away from the life she once shared with Peter. For the first time in years, Glory was alone. Grace's life had also fallen apart. After the scandal, Madame Bose fired her from the boutique. Word spread quickly in Lagos. People whispered about her everywhere. No one should trust that woman. Grace stopped going out often. She spent most of her days inside her small apartment, the same room she once shared with Glory. Sometimes she sat quietly for hours, thinking about the past, thinking about the friendship they once had, and slowly, regret began creeping into her heart. But pride would not allow her to apologize. Instead, she held on to the one thing she still had, a secret. One afternoon, Grace received shocking news. Glory had returned to Surulere. She was living quietly and trying to rebuild her life. When Grace heard this, her heart raced. For a moment, she thought about going to see her, but then she remembered the anger, the betrayal, the humiliation, and she changed her mind. Some wounds are too deep, she whispered to herself, but fate had other plans.
One evening, there was a knock on Grace's door. When she opened it, her heart nearly stopped. It was Glory, standing silently in the hallway. The two women stared at each other for a long moment. Years of friendship, years of memories, all hanging in the air between them. Finally, Glory spoke. "I'm tired of running from the past." Grace folded her arms. "So why are you here?" Glory's voice trembled slightly. "I came to understand something." Grace raised an eyebrow. "What?" Glory looked directly into her eyes. "Why did you hate me so much?" Grace laughed bitterly. "You really want to know?" "Yes." Grace stepped aside and allowed her to enter. For the first time in months, the two former friends sat in the same room again, and then Grace said something unexpected. "You think Peter was the reason I betrayed you?" Glory nodded slowly. "Wasn't he?" Grace shook her head. "No." Her voice became quiet. "The truth is, this story started long before Peter." Glory frowned. "What do you mean?" Grace looked down at the floor, and finally, she revealed the secret she had hidden for years. "When we first came to Lagos," Grace said slowly, "I lied to you about something." Glory felt a strange tension in her chest. "What lie?" Grace looked up. "Do you remember the scholarship you almost got before leaving the village?" Glory's eyes widened. The memory came back immediately. Years ago, before coming to Lagos, Glory had been offered a rare scholarship to study in the city. But suddenly the opportunity disappeared. The sponsor withdrew, and Glory never knew why. "Yes," Glory said slowly. "What about it?" Grace swallowed hard. "I made sure you didn't get it." The room went silent. Glory stared at her in shock. "What are you saying?" Grace's voice trembled. "I wrote a letter to the sponsor, pretending to be someone from your village." Glory's hands began shaking. "You? What?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I told them you were irresponsible, that you would embarrass them." Glory could barely breathe. "Why would you do that?" Grace whispered the painful truth. "Because I was afraid of losing you." Glory's voice broke. "So you destroyed my future." Grace nodded slowly. "I knew if you went to school in Lagos, you would leave me behind." Glory's tears began falling. "All these years, I thought it was bad luck." Grace wiped her eyes. "That was the first time I betrayed you." She paused. "And after that, jealousy became a habit." Glory sat silently. The pain she felt now was deeper than the betrayal with Peter, because this meant something terrifying. Grace had been sabotaging her life for years, long before the man who destroyed their friendship ever appeared. Glory stood up slowly. "I trusted you with my life." Grace looked down. "I know, and you destroyed it." Grace nodded quietly. "I'm sorry, but sometimes sorry is not enough." Glory walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned around. "For years, I blamed Peter for ruining my life," she said. "But now I understand something." Grace looked up. "What?" Glory spoke calmly. "The real enemy was never my husband." She paused. "It was the jealousy hiding inside my best friend." Grace lowered her head, and for the first time, she truly felt the weight of everything she had done. Jealousy does not grow in a stranger's heart first. It grows in the heart of someone close to you. Grace allowed jealousy to control her life. Glory learned the painful cost of trusting blindly, and in the end, two sisters by choice became strangers forever.